am Jeremy Mesud. I am a research leader for CGG. And the title of my e-lecture is Full Waveform Inversion with Optimal Transport, a three-dimensional implementation and an application on a field dataset. So what is the motivation for such a work? Please let me show you a result obtained with conventional or least squares or LSQ FWI on the Norwegian continental shelf. On the left figure, you can see the observed data in wiggle and the model data in colors. And if the match was perfect between the model and the observed data, we should see only black and blue here. But we can see some red indicating a poor matching, and also some red spots. So what happens here is that one event of the observed data is in phase with an event of the model data, and then suddenly the model data changes phase and pursues his route in phase with another event of the observed data. So it's blue before, it's blue after, but at the change of phase or at the cycle skip, there is a red spot. So this is a clear sign of local cycle skipping. Now, if we check the velocity model update on the middle figure and on the right figure, you can see that there is a lack of structural coherency. So the stack is superimposed here, and this is a result of the local cycle skipping. Now let me show you the result of optimal transport FWI. So this is least squares, this is optimal transport. Least squares, optimal transport. Least squares, optimal transport. Least squares, optimal transport. We can clearly see that there is much less cycle skipping. And as a consequence, the velocity update is more structural. It has more structural coherency. So how do we obtain such a result? This is what we are going to discuss in this e-lecture. And this is the outline of my talk. Firstly, I will remind some optimal transport desirable properties. Then I will give some details on our industrial implementation. And I will end with the field data results. So the optimal transport desirable properties. So please let me talk first about the least squares cost function. Least squares can shift traces from half a cycle only, and this leads to the cycle skipping issue. On the top right figure, you can see a real data trace that is in phase with a model data trace. Because they are in phase, this produces a local minimum in the least squares cost function, and least squares FWI will remain stuck in this configuration. But there is a global shift, so this is definitely not the optimum situation. So to mitigate this cycle skipping problem, we can start from better initial models that are less than half a cycle away from the optimum model, and this can be achieved using the tomography, for instance. We also can enhance the low frequency or use the low frequency in the data to produce a smoother update, a more low frequency update that will allow to overcome the cycle skipping somewhat, and broadband acquisition are helpful for that. We also can use the data selection, for instance, running FWI with the diving waves, because they have a large scattering angle. We can demonstrate that they will lead to a more low frequency update. But despite all those precautions, local cycle skipping can still exist, as demonstrated with the data of the introduction. It could be due to noisy data, to steep dips, etc. What about optimal transport cost functions now? They are more sensitive to global trace shift, so they should allow to overcome better the cycle skipping issue. They are insensitive to random noise, that is always a desirable property for cost functions. And one subtlety is that they can inherently be multidimensional or multi-D in the data space. We do not talk about the multidimensionality in the model space. We always invert for 3D models. Here we talk about the multidimensionality in the data space. It means the ability of the optimal transport cost function to account explicitly for correlations between the time and the receiver direction in the data. So now what do we use the plural for cost functions? Because there are several optimal transport cost functions, and they are related to something called the p-Wasserstein distances. So p here refers to LP norm in the data coordinate space. So what are the possible choices of the Wasserstein distance? Enquist et al. And Yang et al. Proposed to use the 1D 2 Wasserstein distance. It means one-dimensional optimal transport, searching correlations in the time direction only. 2 Wasserstein distance, meaning we use L2 norm in the data coordinate space. And because optimal transport, the original formulation should deal with probability densities, so positive quantities, we have to do something with the seismic data that is both positive and negative. So they propose to use a positive transformation. And later, Metivier et al. Proposed another positive transformation within this framework. There is another possibility that exploits the multidimensional aspect of the Wasserstein distance, so explicitly accounts for correlations between the time and the receiver directions within the framework of the 1 Wasserstein distance. So we use the L1 norm in the data coordinate space. This is the dual formulation that is used here, and some adaptation can be done within this framework to use directly the seismic data and do not use positive transformations of the seismic data. And this leads to the scheme called multi-D Kantorovich-Rubinstein, or KR distance. This has been proposed within the framework of FWI by Metivier et al. And we implemented this and proved this effectiveness on the real data in Poncet et al. And also in Messiud et al. So this is the choice we did, and this is the one we are going to discuss in the remaining slides of this presentation. So KR-FWI, we can use seismic data directly, no need of positive transformation. We believe this is a good point. Also, it is better than least squares regarding the cycle skipping issue. So on the right figure, you can see the cost functions computed for various shift values between 2 recurs. So 1 recur for the observed data, 1 recur for the model data. And we shift them. Well, we can see that the least squares cost function in blue has 1 global minimum and 2 local minimums. And we can see that the KR cost function also has 1 global minimum, of course at the same position, and also 2 global minimums. So what is the real difference between both? In fact, the KR cost function, the value of the global minimum, is twice larger with the KR cost function, almost twice larger than with the least squares cost function. And twice larger can be huge when we deal with low frequencies. It can really allow to start from velocity models that are less good and more far away from the optimum solution. Also, with this formulation, the multidimensional aspects are manageable, and this leads to a more robust scheme, as demonstrated in Messiud et al. And Metivier et al. So now, what about the industrial implementation of this multi-DK or FWI? So this is the FWI flow. We start from an Earth model, we do some modeling into this Earth model, we obtain a model data, D, and we want to compare it to a real data through a cost function. And all cost function will be sensitive to various aspects of the difference between both, but all should tend to 0 if the model data perfectly matches the real data. So basically what we want to do is to determine the changes in the Earth model that reduce the cost function. And to do so, we will use a local optimization scheme or a gradient descent scheme. We want to compute the gradient in the velocity model space. To compute this gradient, we proceed in 2 steps. Firstly, we compute the gradient in the data space. That is called the adjoint source. It is the derivative of the cost function with respect to the model data. So it is defined in the data space, and then we will backpropagate it in the subsurface. We will forward propagate the source, we will cross-correlate the results, and we can demonstrate this is the gradient in the model space. Then we do some tuning of the gradient, we subtract it to the velocity model, and we obtain the updated model, and we loop until we have reduced sufficiently the cost function. So you can see that the beauty of the optimization kernel is that a change of cost function only affects the adjoint source, the thing we backpropagate. So let us illustrate that with least squares FWI. It is based on the residual, so the difference between the model and the real data, and the cost function is half the sum of the squares of the samples of the residual. And if we compute the gradient in the data space of this cost function, we obtain the residual. This is why in least squares FWI, we backpropagate the residual. What about optimal transport FWI now? And especially the multi-DKR formulation. Here I show you the cost function of multi-DKR. And it is now a maximization problem we have to resolve. So the residual delta D still enters into account, but there is another quantity called phi that is also defined in the data space, and we want to maximize phi scalar delta D under some constraints that we'll make explicit later. So this is multi-DKR cost function. And we can demonstrate up to a very good approximation because of the specific form of the constraints that the adjoint source, the derivative of this cost function with respect to the model data, is equal to phi. So to compute the cost function, we must invert for phi, and once we have the phi, it is the one we will backpropagate. So how does this phi looks like? This is the adjoint source for least squares FWI, so the residual delta D, for one shot and various receiver lines within the shot. And this is the adjoint source for multi-DKR, so the famous phi from optimal transport. So least squares, multi-DKR, least squares, multi-DKR, delta D, phi. So we can see a difference of texture. There is a slight difference in the wavelet, it is more triangular, and there is much more continuity in the move-out direction, much more amplitude balancing. If we take a spectra now of those adjoint sources, we can see that the multi-DKR has much more low frequencies. And this is very important to overcome the cycle skipping. So the properties of the multi-DKR adjoint source. It is more coherent. It has more continuity and amplitude balancing in the move-out direction. It also has more low frequencies. In other terms, it has a more skeleton-like texture. It enhances the kinematics, it puts more weight on the kinematics, and this is important to overcome the cycle skipping. So let us go into slightly more details about the implementation. Here you can see the equation for the maximization problem for phi, and the constraints on phi have been made explicit. And we resolve this maximization problem for each shot and each receiver line separately within a shot. So for one receiver line, we compute the maximization problem. For another receiver line, we compute the maximization problem, etc. So it is 2D optimal transport, allowing to take explicitly into account correlations between the time direction and the receiver line direction. So now to resolve this problem, we use an iterative scheme as proposed by Métivier et al. And also used in Poncet et al. And the interest of this iterative scheme is that it allows to go from least squares to optimal transport. It means we start from least squares, we iterate, and we add more and more optimal transport into the adjoint source. In other terms, we obtain an intermediary set of solutions that span from least squares to optimal transport. So we can control the amount of optimal transport we want to put in the adjoint source. Also, the first constraint is a thresholding constraint. X here is a two-dimensional vector of coordinates in the data space, so the time position and the receiver position. And we can demonstrate that if we change the K value, we can span from L1 to optimal transport this time. So this K value is computed automatically. But the interest with this scheme is that it gives the possibility to tune the amount of optimal transport compared to more standard norms like the least squares one or the L1 one. What about the second constraint now? The second constraint really contains a lot of physics. It's a constraint on the slope of phi. It constrains the slope of phi not to be too large. So we don't want phi to change too rapidly. And this will bring low frequency in phi, the optimal transport adjoint source. So this is very fundamental to obtain the phi texture and to overcome the cycle skipping. But there is something specific to the multidimensional formulation. It is the right-hand side term in this equation. So we have a metric, and we proposed in a Ponce et al. To use a generalized metric in the data space, so basically using covariances or variances within this metric. So one variance is a variance in the receiver line direction. This one really affects the result with a finite number of iterations. The second one, the variance in the time direction, is parameterized in terms of a velocity, and this velocity is crucial to define the average direction for correlations between the time and the receiver dimensions, so to enhance the coherency along the move-out direction. So because of the generalized metric, we were able to better account for the correlations in the move-out direction between traces, and this is illustrated in Messud et al. Okay, so now how does this improves the velocity model update? We can come back to the Norwegian continental shelf result showed in the introduction, but with a larger view now. This is the initial model for both least squares and multi-decay RFWI. This is the result of least squares FWI, and this is the result of multi-decay R. So least squares, multi-decay R, least squares, multi-decay R, least squares, multi-decay R. We can see, thanks to the stack, that we have a better structural coherency. And this is due to the cycle skipping that has been reduced with the multi-decay R formulation. So now let me show you a result on land broadband dense data. So this is land FWI, and this is the result of least squares FWI. On the left figure, you can see the observed and the model data, and you can see some red indicating poor matching, but also with the lower arrow, you can see a red spot, and this is a sign of local cycle skipping. So now, how does the velocity model update look? On the right figure, you have the updated velocity with the stack superimposed. Let me show you now the result with multi-decay R FWI. So least squares, multi-decay R, least squares, multi-decay R, least squares, multi-decay R. We can see that there is clearly less local cycle skipping in the data space. And as a consequence, we have a better velocity inversion with more structural continuity and also an improved velocity inversion below the red layer, at least more contrast. So let us verify that the velocity inversion is improved below the red layer with the well data at the position of the white line. And so we do a zoom on the updated velocity on the left figure. You have the well data on the middle figure, and on the right figure you have the stack, and this is least square FWI. Now this is multi-decay R FWI. Least squares FWI, multi-decay R FWI, least squares FWI, multi-decay R. So we clearly have a better well coherency, and we can confirm with the well that the velocity inversion is better in the case of multi-decay R. And also on the right figure, we can see that we have a better fault imaging. So least squares, one last time, multi-decay R. As a conclusion, we have implemented a version of optimal transport FWI, the multi-decay R1. We have applied it to field data sets. We have observed a reduced sensitivity to cycle skipping, and also an improved robustness, a better structural coherency. So I want to acknowledge CGG for the permission to publish the work, Occidental Petroleum, especially Klaas Koster and Graham Warren, PDO, the Ministry of Oil and Gas of the Sultanate of Oman, INEOS, for providing the data and permission to present these results. And I want to thank Olivier Leblanc and Hervé Prigent for their support. And thank you very much for your attention. So if you enjoyed this presentation, please visit the EIG YouTube channel.